You're listening to Till the Bottom. For better or for worse, everything is fascinating if you dig deep enough. If you agree with this, then this podcast might be right for you. Let's start talking.
And we're back. So welcome back to another delivery of Till the Bottom. Here again, we are your guests, Mitra and Nacho, and as we promised in the last episode, Santiago, Doctor. I keep on saying doctor. I really want you to be a doctor already. But so just please interpret it in a positive light, right?
Yeah.
I believe in you. Yeah. I believe in your career. I believe in your success. And yeah, so as we teased a little bit in the last episode, now we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about the connection between mind and matter and how that falls into place in our respective worldviews that were laid out in the previous episode. So, mind. Somebody wants to start?
So do you want to define it as the heart problem or that's already...
No, that's consciousness, but okay. So I think that what we should do first is one of us has to start saying, where does mind fit into your...
It's a bit non-intuitive, right? Like when you come from absolute rationality, like thinking, okay, this happens because of this and this happens because of this. As soon as you start going back and taking a step back as to who is thinking it. Right?
What's mind?
What's the mind, right? That's where you suddenly are at a loss to explain.
I don't know. Well, okay.
How the lights are on. Like you can explain almost everything, and maybe there's there is a way of explaining how does this question of self arises from. You can have a certain set of rules which leads to something like that occurring, but that still doesn't explain what it is, right? Like how do we grasp?
Yeah, well, I think before kind of getting ahead of ourselves, I think there's kind of a first safe step that we can make, or at least I would like to make, is that mind is from a very I think I would start saying something like it's something that the brain does, and I don't see a possibility of mind being divorced from the most complex organ that we have, which is the brain. Obviously, I think they're pretty much connected. I think I am of the opinion, and it's not even an opinion. Opinion is too weak a word to describe how I feel about this, because I just don't see another possibility of that deviates so much from the notion that minds are emergent phenomena that arises from the complexity of a certain structure, in this case, the organ that is the brain. Would you have any quarrel with that idea, with that basic notion that there's something about the mind that is absolutely divorced from the brain or from the body?
Well, I would say that somehow confining the mind to the brain is a little bit too much, in my opinion.
I would just.
But
I would be a little. I'll just something, because probably that was too restrictive. But I mean the body, because we know now that there are some other parts. For instance, the parts of the digestive system that also influence or color our subjective experiences. They are so kind of interconnected to some.
Don't you have
the role is traced by the nervous system, yeah. But it's a body phenomenon.
But it's very.
I mean, an in-body phenomenon. Like
it happens within ourselves. Mind, so
it happens within ourselves.
But your description is very anthropological.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm talking about mostly about the human mind.
Okay. So you're not extending it to...
We can talk about the possibility of animals having minds, but in that notion still holds, which is whichever animal you want to talk about, the basic notion is that their minds, whatever qualities their minds might have, they are definitely tied to their bodies and their organs, and
the
particularly
neural system.
particularly the brain. I put emphasis on that particular organ, even though we know that sensory experiences also affect how the mind works.
So that's what you're saying, the neural circuitry in general, because what you say is perceived by the stomach and making decisions.
But let's keep it general. It happens within ourselves, right? Just to keep it simple, of course, not to involve, not to start talking what is neurological and what is not neurological.
Yeah.
But it's mostly neurological in this case.
It's embodied.
Yeah. So you're already clearly saying that this is not something that happens in any form of cells. Say there is no possibility of a mind in plants, for instance.
No. All I'm saying is that wherever the mind comes from, it's not coming from any object or any. It's not coming from outside ourselves.
Yeah.
It's not being handed down to us from the top to the bottom somehow or anything like that.
Okay.
It is something.
It's an emergent property of bodies, particularly brains.
Actually, I tend to subscribe to that idea. What I believe is, I think that what you mean by mind might involve also intelligence, partially, and consciousness at some point. Or does it not involve?
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Okay. I was only referring to consciousness, but he is also referring to.
But okay, let me just explain my shortly my point of view. I think that mind is, or what you consider as mind, something, as you were saying, I also consider it to be emerging, and I also consider it to be a phenomenon that is evolving depending on the degree of complexity of the organism that possesses it. That means, and what I believe is that usually if an organism is relatively, I'm gonna use the word simple, whatever it means, let's say
in relative terms.
In relative terms,
more simple than.
Let's say a plant is biologically simpler than us. The plant will still have a consciousness and will probably still have some sort of intelligence, if you want to call it like this. But it's at a different scale to ours, right? And the more the complexity starts increasing, the more you can do, the more conscious you will be, the more intelligent you will be. But it's all emerging from the complexity of this whole thing.
So that's the exact point I wanted to make. Where do we draw the line? Because he said, maybe it's an emergent property also in plants.
But I have a little bit of an issue with that.
Or what is mind in this case?
I have a little bit of an issue with that. I mean, we haven't defined consciousness, but I think we'll try to. But whatever that is, I don't think it's a property that plants have, for instance. I think for the arising of consciousness, you need a minimum level of complexity. I don't know where that level lies, but I don't think plants qualify.
But again, what do you mean by consciousness?
Yeah, but okay. So probably do we get into that already? Shall we?
No. But we. I wasn't clear about what you meant by the mind. Like, if we don't start talking about consciousness.
Okay, the mind, in my view, has certain properties, and there are minds that are. I don't know to which degree. I'm not quite sure to which degree you can marry the two notions of mind and consciousness, and to which degree they might be separable from one another. It all depends on what you define consciousness to be. So that's why I think
Hegel's definition.
Yeah, I think that's why I think that you need to give a notion, throw some words about what you think consciousness is, and from there you can probably reach a conclusion of whether that is an inherent property of the mind or not. So consciousness in Thomas Nagel, this philosopher who wrote a very famous essay.
And when was that actually?
I cannot remember.
Because I've heard so many people quote him.
Yeah, but it's
really
definitely 80s.
So it's the modern world.
It's contemporary. It's
contemporary.
It's not old thing. It's the title is something like what is it like to be a bat?
Okay.
and it's trying
It
to
sums it up.
Yeah, that's basically that's what the point is.
Mm.
It's trying to explain how the subjective worldview of a bat might be like, and the problems that we might encounter when we try to kind of, from our standing point, understand what that subjective experience might be like. But the whole point is that, not the whole point, but what one thing that transpires from that essay is that it provides some sort of framework to define what a consciousness might be, or just to set a certain definition. And the general idea is that consciousness, an organism an organism that has consciousness is an organism that is, you can start to imagine what it would be like to be that organism. Yeah,
though you
does that
cannot
make sense?
Comprehend, but
There is
if
something.
it is something,
there is something
like
to be
being
like that. If there's something, there's for instance, there's nothing. The notion of being like a glass of beer does not really make sense, right? There is, you can be pretty certain, I think, that this glass with this beer does not have anything like subjective experiences at all.
So that's where do you draw the line?
So that's line. That's a bright line.
Yeah.
If the organism you're talking about, the object you're talking about, cannot foster the possibility of having subjective experiences, and or not necessarily that, but there's nothing that is like to be like that particular object, then I think you can pretty safely say that thing does not have a consciousness.
Yes, and it's your speculation. No, because I want to get to a point which annoys me a lot with some of the Hindu philosophies, for instance. So a lot of people are coming from my part of the world would argue that it's very presumptuous of us to think that plants or maybe a bacteria or an amoeba doesn't have this sense of self either, right? So that's an element that runs to a lot of our philosophies, where there is a sense of spirit that exists in all lives, living things, right? So unless we get to the nitty-gritties of what exactly what they call spirit is, and what we are trying to define as consciousness is, maybe it's something on the similar lines.
Yeah, sure.
Unless we get to the nitty-gritties, how are we able to conclude where to draw the line?
It's a bit of, you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say that it's a hermeneutics, right? It is semantics. It's also a problem with definitions there.
Yeah.
But
there is an equivalent philosophy, Western philosophy, let's call it like that. That is, I think it's very similar to probably what people that subscribe to the Hindu doctrine might be.
Also
might
the
have in their
Buddhists and
minds.
the Jains.
Buddhists, so on.
All the Eastern.
It's regarded. It's usually regarded with the name of panpsychism, which is essentially, broadly speaking, the idea that consciousness is a fundamental property of matter. It just as electrons have spin and they have charge and they have mass, they have a unit of consciousness. Now, as far as my understanding goes, that's all pretty much you can say. I mean, the idea is that, so you assume that fundamental particles have a unit of consciousness. If you add more of them, the consciousness of the system of particles starts to increase. And then you reach a certain point by just adding more and more particles and forming more and more complex structures. And you go along the curve of consciousness, which is increasing with the level of complexity of the particular object that you're forming. But consciousness was kind of there from the beginning in a unitary form. Yeah, that's I think David Chalmers, this Australian philosopher. I think I don't think he's the person that came up with this idea originally, but he's the one that is definitely credited with popularizing that idea. Now, but from my point of view, there's just nothing. What do you gain? In terms of knowledge, if you might say, yeah, sure, I'm gonna add to my table of fundamental properties of matter consciousness is gonna be there with the color of the quarks or the charm or whatever. You have another extra slot there. For
The
consciousness.
charm of the quarks.
A quark up has 1/3 of consciousness or whatever.
Which are insane in by themselves. But
well, let's say you add this. What do you?
Yeah, but actually, now that I think of it, like some philosophies in Hinduism, we represent any form of matter to some level of divinity. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, my point is that I don't think by postulating this, which first of all, I don't see how to make that conform to the empiricist tradition of the experimentalist tradition. How would you? I cannot even begin to imagine an experiment that will tell you, we have designed this way to detect the consciousness of an atom. And I don't see what kind of knowledge, what do you gain from postulating such idea in terms of knowing more about the world? I don't see the connection. It's not clear at all for me. It seems rather arbitrary. It seems not quite, because I don't know. You want to say something at this moment, because I'm gonna move to a connected idea.
Go ahead.
I can. There's just like a progression there,
I could continue in a certain different tangent, but I guess it's not the point at the moment.
Anyway, the point is that there's this other scientist, Giulio Tononi. I don't know if you've heard about this guy. This guy came up with the idea of integrated information, and that probably consciousness can be explained as a consequence of integrated information, which also has to do with the level of complexity. I would have to first define what complexity means in this.
No. As soon as you say that, in my head, what happens? Okay, it has to be a multicellular organism.
You have fundamental blocks. You have fundamental blocks to build an object, to build anything you want. And now there are many different ways, let's say, in which you can assemble these fundamental blocks. Think about them as pieces of Lego, Lego bricks. You can assemble them with many possible configurations, and each one of these possible configurations will have a certain level of complexity attached to it. But actually, I don't think probably Lego blocks are not the best example. But think about dendritic structures like neurons, that they can be interconnected with one another, forming very, very complicated architectures. And actually, the level of connectedness between these neurons will be somehow related to the level of complexity of the whole structure. Now, this complexity of the structure is able to sustain a certain amount of information that can be stored within it. And the more integrated this information is within the structure and within the different components, the higher you rise in the ladder of consciousness, let's say. More or less, I'm just being very shady in this discussion, but that's kind of the idea, no? And I think panpsychism, the notion that consciousness is a fundamental unit, can be very nicely mixed with this or integrated within this other theory. But I just don't see, what the advantage of is. The advantage of integrated information, I get it, because I subscribe to the notion that consciousness and minds have to do with complexity, as you think you hinted at that in your initial remark. But panpsychism, which is more along the lines of the Buddhist, Hindu, whatever tradition, I don't see what's there to gain in such a notion.
Yeah.
I guess these are just mainly definitions, right? So you just call something. It's like, I understand your point also. Maybe defining a unit of consciousness is not the most helpful tool to really try to understand the whole world. But it's a tool still, right? It's like the spin of the electron is something that, you tell kids and you write it in the books that something spin up or spin down, but it's not like really this spin up or spin down. It just represents a state, right? Or a particular property of that. But in this case, I know what you're going to, because the concept of consciousness is a little bit more fuzzy, right? It's quite fuzzy. It's not
Fuzzy.
Fuzzy.
Yeah.
Not something that you can really measure or study, right? It's like,
But
not
it-
really.
Just because it's an unsolved problem, we don't know yet.
But there's
exactly
another
it is.
point that I would just get across with what he's saying is when we talk about properties, we talk about spin up, spin down, or we talk about how we perceive the world. We tend to have a digital notion of world.
On and
when-
off, or-
Like things are this way or that way. Like as we discussed in the last thing,
Yeah.
that we don't think in probabilistic terms. For instance, like our notion of reality is intuitively is very
Discrete.
yeah. It's
Not
like
probabilistic.
there is, yeah, exactly. Yeah, discrete. Discrete is the word, not digital. Yeah. So we do not perceive a lot of things in the analogous way.
I'm not sure about. Okay.
Yeah. We tend to try and understand things when we look back at it, but we don't have an intuition for it. And maybe it's just the way we approach it that we just don't understand some of the things.
We are bad by nature. We are bad statisticians in a certain sense. That we are very bad at judging, for instance, the probability of the outcome of events when they happen one after the next, and they actually happen to be completely uncorrelated to one another. Like the typical fallacy of the gambler, like you go to the casino in Vegas and somebody's spinning the roulette, and it just happens that in the last 5 turns the ball was falling in red, and it's like it has to be black the next one, right?
Yeah.
Because it's been, and if you ask, it's been falling in red the last 5 times, and that's really improbable, and it might be really improbable. It might have fallen in red 25 times before, but the point is that intuition is just wrong, because this is a series of completely uncorrelated events, unless the ball is loaded
Rigged.
somehow.
Yeah.
The whole thing, then the whole thing breaks apart, and the gambler was right. Good point. But in that sense, we are bad judging probabilities. But there is another way in which we are not that bad judging probabilities. For instance, when we are good at seeing regularities, no?
Patterns.
Discerning patterns in nature, like weather patterns or patterns of migration of animals. And so in that sense, we can gauge very well probabilities of, at this time of the year, there might be this certain antelope that is there, and if I go there, might have better chances than if I go at this other time of the year. So our capacity to judge or to think probabilistically, it's pretty much connected to those things that are very essential for our survival.
Yeah, so that's a point you're trying to nail it down, right? Like what is intuitive to us is because of the history of how we have evolved.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, and I think we can.
So probability and these things, of course, when we talk in terms of really small things and stuff, it becomes intuitive because we relate to probability in something else. Okay, the probability of all humans going in under a shade when it's raining is very high. so if you give something like that, then we understand it very intuitively, because that is something.
But if you see the hippie looking guy walking across, you will infer the opposite.
Yeah. No. So
barefoot guy.
Yeah, he's not going. He's absolutely not.
But this notion of an atom, the word atom came even way before we actually found the atom, right? The indivisible, like we tried to find that in biology in terms of what are the unit of DNA or something as well, and we call that refer to that as the atom of the human, like biology. So we do think discretely when we break things down to the absolute bottom.
Yeah. Okay. I think. Should I?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just talking. So.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So we definitely break the world down into objects, and these objects are discrete in the sense that they have a certain extension, and they don't tend to violate that extension. So, in that sense, we definitely sort out the world between finite entities that you recognize as objects. Now, which properties these objects need to have in order for you to recognize them as such, that's a tough question. And actually, I was reading rather recently about it seems to be that one of the fundamental properties that something out there in the world needs to have in order for you to classify it as a single unified entity that you might call an object is that thing has to be trackable. You need to be able to track its movement. As long as you have a thing that moves as a whole out there, seems to be uniform and follows a certain trajectory, and that you can focus your attention into how that particular thing is moving across, then that is kind of the minimum criterion that you need in order to identify that thing as an object. So in that sense, yeah, we have this tendency to think to discretize the world in separate units, so-called objects. And that's a property of the human mind. And now you might wonder why is that the case? I mean, what's the use of it? And I think this is a nice segue towards understanding the mind from an evolutionary point of view. The human mind, at the very least, and also probably we can speculate about the minds of animals and minds of other kind of creatures. I don't know if you want to.
Maybe, do you have something to say about it?
About this in particular, or
the evolution,
going towards evolution, you mean? Or
yeah, looking at the phenomenon of the mind from an evolutionary perspective. So, in the sense of, I think we agree. I'm assuming we agree that minds are the product of certain substrates that have a certain level of complexity. Complexity meaning how their parts, their fundamental units, their building blocks are integrated and interconnected with one another. What's the particular architecture that these things need to have? That's harder to determine. We have.
So we are calling, basically, we are referring to mind as this sort of mesh of, like consciousness, self-awareness, intelligence, whatever. I mean,
cognition, perception.
Those are kind of the properties of the mind, right?
Okay, so
then
we are grouping all
everything
these
together.
So these things are properties of the mind. So mind is
these
as
are
something.
the human mind, let's say.
No, it could. You can extend it to other animals also.
Because the problem is, if you make it just human, then okay.
No, I don't want to make it just human. But if you want to say subjective experience, for instance, now think about a cockroach. Does a cockroach have a mind? Probably. Yeah, I mean, it does have a neural system.
It's a biosensor.
It has a nervous system.
Yeah.
It certainly has a nervous system, and it certainly in this nervous system there's some sort of software running that tells the cockroach that when you turn on the light, it better hides because for its own survival, for it to maintain its fitness. Yeah, I mean that's a sort of a mind. It's a system that can react to stimuli coming from the outside world.
So in that sense, the cockroach has a mind.
Yeah, but subjective experience? In the sense that we understand?
Okay.
So that's what I mean.
Okay.
This might be a property when we talk about subjective experience in common parlance, in common language. It's something about the properties of our human mind. I would be very doubtful to extend that to all the way down to cockroach, right?
But
you still might argue that the cockroaches have kind of a mind, something.
But let's not forget. I'm gonna bring also another topic. Let's not forget that even within humans, we have also different levels of consciousness and mindfulness, if you want to call it like this, right? I mean, there are some people that go literally around the world and they are not very mindful, right? Yeah. And these kind of people are, sure, they belong to the same species, but I would not tell that they are really that mindful as.
So let's say that you can score.
So let's just clear it out. Like, what do you mean by mindful?
well, mindful, I mean like how self-aware, like how aware are they about their surroundings, about themselves, about what they are doing, right? Because I mean, some people are literally running like almost like zombies, right? And they still claim.
Sure.
Well, not claim. They probably don't even claim it. They are just living.
And my argument is ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So this is what you mean, right? Like when we say this word ignorance is bliss, you're referring to people who are mindful. They lack mindfulness.
Yes.
Yes.
But are we talking about these, or in general about the property of being, let's say, aware of our
subjective experience, the feeling of pain, not the response. Okay, if something is there, some trigger happens, and you retract from there, but the fact that we're feeling it.
Yes.
So that is the subjective experience that.
And furthermore, whether you can also, I mean, there are different kinds of. Can you feel pain, or can you also feel pain in others? Right. That's your.
Sure. That's also another form of nuance. That's another form of subjectivity.
I would claim, for example, that there are some serial killers that are completely unaware of this. They don't. They kill someone. They don't feel anything. Right. They are completely irreactive, right? Or some masochist, right? They enjoy pain, they like it, and so that's why it's a little bit.
But I think we're kind of mixing things up a little bit. So that but this is not. I think it's natural. It's hard to find the language to talk about topics like this that are still pretty much at the frontier of what is it's scientifically established. The language, or at least as far as I am familiar with, none of us it's a trained psychologist, none of us it's a neuroscientist, and they for sure probably have in their arsenal of words better ways to talk about this kind of phenomena, but we don't, and it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to try to describe the nature of subjective experience. What are the properties of the mind? Which kind of if you have the concept mind, let's talk about let me just focus for a moment in the case of human minds. Now, what are the components? There's intelligence, for instance. Humans are capable to display intelligent behavior, some more than others, but still, they're able to solve problems. Now, you might say minds probably to some degree are all able to display a certain level of intelligence. Fine, that's a property of a mind. Now, which other property might be there? Subjective experience. Now, is subjective experience something that comes with having a mind or not? No. So, in the case of humans, certainly yes. Humans, unless you have a certain, a very bad congenital malformation or something of the sort, which I'm talking about, the standard normal human beings, normal quote unquote, don't want to offend anyone. They are capable of having subjective experience. So yeah, check. That's another property of at least the human mind. Now you run down to other forms of organisms and other forms of life, and then you start becoming a little bit more doubtful whether, chimps maybe have. I have no problem saying chimps have subjective experiences. Probably very similar to our subjective experiences.
Elephants cry. Crocodiles have tears.
Elephants grieve, for example.
And at that point, the last 20 minutes, we are now going to come back to Nagel's definition.
So that then you keep on running down the evolutionary tree, the tree of life, and then you reach a point in which you don't know. Cockroaches, grasshoppers, bacteria, amoeba, protozoans. Do they have subjective experiences? Then I think I'm pretty confident in saying I don't think so. I don't think they do. But and to which point you have minds that you can, with good reasons, call minds that do not have subjective experience. So subjective experience seems to be a property of some minds, and perhaps not a property of other kinds of more rudimentary minds. Fine. Which other property might be there when you talk about minds? You have reflexive behavior. right? Things that you do, quote unquote, unconsciously, yeah, right? So you put your hand here, suddenly it gets very warm, you click it, you don't have to think about it. You just do that as a reflex. And I think that kind of reflexive behavior, which is just a direct response to stimuli from the environment, I think that's something that all minds generally have. You can,
but that's there's this question of choice. Like for instance, if
free will.
No, let's not go that far. Let's not go that far. Okay. You said that something is hot, and your immediate reflex is to get it off, right? But suppose you have a hot cake you're getting out of the oven. Even though it's burning, you'll quickly go and put it on the table and not let it fall.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Yeah. You will bear the pain.
No, what I'm saying is, of course, this is a very vague example of choice.
It's very much context dependent, right? Depends.
So it's a context dependent thing, right? And this, we call it, like, this could be translated into some form of a choice of, if the pain is too much, we can also decide to just let it go and stuff like that.
It's a reward kind of thing, right? I mean, you don't have to sustain pain
so some element of choice would also possibly exist in lower forms of life. Well, lower is a very cliched way of saying it, but less complex forms of life.
It's just more restricted, right? The space of possible choices that they might have, they might be able to opt for. It's just more restricted, right?
Definitely, yeah.
I mean, I would say that as you go down, you have humans, you have primates, you have you have apes, you have the monkeys, you have the whole set of primates, indeed, which is a category that encapsulates all of these ones that I mentioned before. All of these, I would say, they kind of display behavior that seems to, not seems to, it's conforms very well with the capacity of being able to make choices to some degree. Now you go down, what do you have? Rodents, you have other mammals. Rodents also, rodents solve mazes, for instance, right? And
but as soon as you move out of mammals, then you're a bit uncertain.
Yeah, reptiles seem to have also some fundamental, some degree.
Possibly some lizards that I have.
They have complex behaviors, right? That are maybe associated. Not maybe they're associated that some under certain circumstances they take choices.
So let me try and get to the point I was coming, or maybe you can just finish what you're.
No, you want to just reach the limit. So you go reptiles, you go birds, and so on. But then you reach insects. Which kind of decisions can an insect take? Surely there are insects that are more, you would say, smarter than others. I don't know. I assume probably a predator insect like a spider. It has a more intelligent behavior than a grasshopper.
I have not read this book on the social lives of ants, but there seems to be some very, very strong programming and some decision making that is involved.
Yes, but that's different from the capacity of taking decisions. Right. So I think they have a software that is much more rigid, and then you go even lower to reach the realm of unicellular organisms. I think
you just jumped a huge section to unicellular.
Yeah, but okay, but algae or plants, they don't have the capacity to choose in the same sense in any way in which we can relate to.
Yeah, I think the direction you're going towards is a self-awareness, right? Is this sort of, I mean, they probably do some, I do believe they have a very intelligent collective behavior. Some organisms can display this, but individually they are certainly not as self-aware as we are. By self-aware, I mean, we, as you were pointing out, we can make choices. And
you're saying that it's like an emergent consciousness in terms of these is like a social consciousness.
They are exactly. They are much more simple, right? In their they're probably not thinking like.
That just opens something up.
No, but that's not. That doesn't even
swarm behavior, right? Like like ants work, right?
But that goes in absolute contradiction. And I think we kind of agreed on the definition, more or less in the definition on
no.
Something that is conscious is something that it's there's a possibility to be like that something.
Yeah.
And when you talk about collective consciousness, there's nothing that it's to be like a colony of ants. Right?
Yeah, we cannot identify, but I'm talking about basically we cannot identify ourselves with that. But I understand your point. Maybe
I just want to use the word
a
consciousness.
single ant probably is not as conscious or self-aware, or probably in your word it does not have the same mind that we have.
No, it doesn't have the same mind. It might have something, a kind. It's
kind
just,
of mind, yeah.
It's just minds can be graded on a curve. What's the parameter that you would use to make that gradation? I think it comes down to something like the flexibility of the software that I'm borrowing terms from computational theory, which is something like an ant has a very, I would say, for human standards at least, rigid kind of software.
Yeah.
In the sense that it will respond to a given stimulus. If the stimulus is invariant in 99 experiments or in 100 experiments, the ant is very likely to respond in an invariant way 99% of the time. Right? In humans, there's a higher level of unpredictability because the software that runs in our brains or in our head, in our minds, is much more inflexible and complex. So yeah, I'm still willing to use the word mind to describe the software that it's running in the nervous system of an ant. But I have to emphasize over and over and again that it's not a mind that we can even begin to understand subjectively. The only way we can probe into the nature of this particular mind is through experiments and just measuring action and reaction, something like that, and describe it in statistical terms and stuff like that.
So sure. But can I also talk about a certain other tangent? Go ahead. Yeah. So, not mind, but I do understand, or at least I think I have a feeling for the value of having a self is like consciousness is like in some form in evolutionary terms, like if you think about, for instance, eyes. What's the point of eyes? Why do a large number of species have eyes?
First, I heard eyes as in frozen water.
Yeah.
What's the point of it?
Yeah.
And that explains the evolutionary reason why. Okay.
Yeah. So what's the point of eyes?
It's a rhetorical question, or you want?
No, just elaborate on it. Just let's get to it. Like why it might be important to have.
Eyes are a very, very good tool to navigate through the world, and if it's a very interesting question actually.
Yeah.
Which prerequisite you need to have in order to evolve eyes, for instance? Mobility, right? I would say. If you're a creature that never moves, sure.
Okay, sure. Never moves. Yeah, sure.
If you're, I don't know. What are you saying? Yeah. If you're a creature that never
mobility,
moves,
I was thinking of walking and everything, but
sure.
Plants
mobility,
or unicellular organisms.
If
they detect radiation and they respond to radiation.
Yeah, but they have better methods in that sense. In their world, eyes would not make the trick.
Plants don't have eyes.
We went to a very strong different tangent. Like, let's just come to the absolute basic reason. Eye is a tool that helps in survival.
Yeah,
yes.
For some creatures, yeah.
For some creatures, not for other creatures.
No, plants don't have eyes. They don't move around.
No, but it is one of these elements that allows some creatures to survive. Yeah. Similarly, you have the nose, you have the ears. Similarly,
the senses.
Yeah, the senses. So that's the point, right? Like, does consciousness also have some sort of a similar theme to it?
Is it like a sense, like another extra sense?
Is it something which helps survival?
Consciousness, in the sense of self-awareness, in the sense of You're talking about. I think you kind of wanted to emphasize the Darwinian utility of the self.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Of consciousness as we described.
From the point
Is
of
it
view of the self.
something to be like a bat? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit confused about the connection with the self because, so, what do you mean by the self? Usually, what people refer to when they are talking about the self is this subjective notion that we have of having an internal narrator, an internal voice, an internal controller of your thoughts. Somebody that is somebody or something, some entity that is there inside your head, doing the thinking for you, doing the thinking stuff, taking the decisions and that kind of. That's
something which has an existence bias, or something like
that's
that.
a difference.
I mean, what
No,
wants
as
to
in
keep you alive? Basically.
Yes, keeps you alive. Like so, and that
But you don't need a
then,
self for that.
because that is the most primal form of survival. Then.
Yeah, but that is not this. You don't need a self. Again, I go back to cockroaches. Do you think they have a self?
Could be a very, very rudimentary form of it, but something
want to be alive.
that
Yeah,
allows
you don't need
that
to
allows
stretch.
them to take certain decisions.
Yeah, but you don't need to stretch the term to encapsulate. Well, okay, fine. Maybe it's just a linguistic thing, but they don't have anything like the self that with which we can identify with.
Sure. So why do you have to think anthropocentrically?
Because of the use of the word.
Yeah.
If you because of the use of what is understood by the word. You know, if you use it and to describe the software, the programs that are running in the nervous system of our
software, which has an interoceptive pathway, which is constantly gauging that okay, this is possible to survive, or this is possible to survive, like the decision making pathway.
Did you listen to this podcast between Sam Harris and Anil Seth?
I did, but it got very technical at some point.
Yeah, but it was. You know,
I didn't.
Yeah.
No, okay.
I have heard the guys.
There is a theory, very interesting there, about the probably evolutionary advantage of having developed a sense of self, which probably initially the main objective of a self was internal monitoring, right, rather than external monitoring. So it was if you have a centralized system, which where most of the cognitive processes are taking place in something in the brain or in the central nervous system, then that nervous system needs to have a way to process signals coming from other parts of the organism, other parts of the body, and then it has to respond to them. So probably the self, this idea, this central processor in a subjective sense that is perceiving signals, crunching the signals and deciding what to do next, was first and foremost a mechanism to monitor the body itself. You say, something hurts there, something is feeling, so maybe I need to withdraw this limb or this extension of myself from whatever source is causing pain. So probably it's first and foremost an internal surveillance system to monitor the state of an organism. Now, certainly
that's what I'm. I don't know. Like I should probably have read more on people. I'm sure people have thought about this.
Yeah, sure.
But I
no,
see
we're the first ones.
but I see the utility of being something, because the lack
You're
of
talking about the
being,
existence bias.
yeah.
It's better to be than not to be.
Yeah, like it's a bias that we do have, and I would assume that in some rudimentary form that may be there in transcend as just like an eye is a tool for survival. That is an perfectly it's a very enhanced tool for survival.
Possibly, to close the circle here in this topic, existence bias, the preference for being alive and exist in the world over not doing that, over failing to do that, maybe that's a property of every mind. Could it be? I mean, would you be willing to stretch?
I think so.
To that?
As long as you're alive, yes.
For instance, again, I just
And in principle, then I'm just talking about the interoceptive system, which is constantly gauging and making.
existence bias is it's a property of things that are alive, right? There's just no form of life is constantly plotting on how to reach its end.
Except some humans.
Except some humans.
Actually, it would be interesting to discuss why we think suicide is wrong with respect to this.
Well, we could do that, but I don't know.
No, not anymore.
That's a different chapter. Right. But I think we have diverged already.
Yeah, we have diverged a lot, but
not quite, because this. I mean, I think you can all connect all of this with why minds are the way they are, why they arose, which kind of functions they have, and which kind of properties they have. And
so that's what I was saying. Like this is my understanding or my feeling for why consciousness exists. But what it is something that I am completely agnostic about.
Not only everyone.
Yeah, like my understanding, I can explain this to myself, like when I'm trying to rationalize things. But I cannot the experience that I feel, that like this thing that is sitting in there.
No, I was gonna comment on so what you were saying before. I really agree that even though this notion of wanting to be alive, I think this is general for every organism that is alive, but these let's say more complex behaviors like what we have, I mean, like having passions, goals, dreams, all these kind of things, these only happens when you reach a certain level of complexity. I really don't think that a cockroach is thinking like, shit, I want to be.
But that's why I said they have a more rudimentary form of
cockroaches.
They have a more rudimentary form of it, but that's I would say that's I would say I'm saying, but that could be the seed to where we have reached so far, because there could be nuances to how to survive and how to. Like, of course, survival is not just, there is a scarcity of water there, so I should move to some other place. It's also about how the social dynamics matters, how...
for some creatures.
Yeah.
The whole.
Well, right now he's talking about desire and passion and these kind of things. That's possible.
This is, I just brought an example, but I mean, if you compare our experience with the cockroach's experience, I really don't think, and I'm pretty convinced that the experience of a cockroach is not even as close as complex as ours. I mean,
that I think
for sure.
I'm very
they don't have.
To accept.
Are you familiar with the concept of theory of mind?
Yeah.
Of the fact that we, for instance, and probably other animals too, surely primates, have the property or have the capacity to look at other members of their own species or even other creatures and assume that these other creatures have minds on their own and thoughts of their own and desires of their own. That is a thing, I believe, that only arises in creatures that have a social environment, right? It's something that, again, cockroaches, they could... cockroaches.
Cucaracha.
It's a hobby horse for this episode. What did they do to deserve this?
Do you have any cockroaches here?
Oh, I hope not. I hate them. Cockroaches are not social. They are not social creatures. They are loners for the most part. They probably meet every now and then to make
they breed so fast that there's a high density of cockroaches. I have good experience with cockroaches. I wouldn't say good, but yes, experience.
They meet every now and then to make creepy thousands of baby cockroaches. But other than that, they don't need to assume that the other cockroach that is in their immediate circle of perception has a purpose of its own, has intentions, has obviously nothing that comes close to desires or anything like that, and we do, and that is again a property of a mind that is not universal all across the board of living creatures. I don't know. I just find it interesting to kind of dissect which properties of mind are, or if you go through the tree of life, how some of these properties, these modules, start arising and where, and which creatures lack that module, lack that property of mind, and which creatures have that module, and why is that's the case.
So my way of seeing it is slightly different from yours. So you talk about lack of it or not lack of it, but if you look at the tree of how things have evolved, and if you see the digestive system or the neural circuitry that is there, you see that there's a natural progression of complexity. So I'm not. You cannot deny. There's no way to know if that's not the same with something like consciousness. It could be another circuitry that we just don't understand, that has gone more and more complex over time. If you look at some of the very, very basic sea creatures, they have very simple neuronal circuitry.
So
some of them.
Yeah. Like octopus. What is
octopus is
what is the plural of octopus?
Octopi.
No,
octopuses.
Octopuses.
Octopuses. Okay.
Yeah.
I just went beyond your landmark of a fuck moment.
No, but octopuses are intelligent.
Yeah, sure. That's why we did like
that's way beyond. Yeah. I'm talking about the thing is, none of us are trained biologists. If we were trained biologists, we would have studied it from the beginning to the end. And there is something beautiful about it, the way they study biology in school or in their bachelors and stuff. You progress from the very basic organisms to the more and more complex organisms, and you see so many patterns with respect to all the different systems that we have. A much more rudimentary form of that would exist in one of the things which is lower down in the tree of evolution, of complexity. Let's not say evolution. And it could very well be that something what we understand as consciousness or the mind for sure, because mind you talk about the neural circuitry as well. So that has become more and more complex. But similarly, this something that we call consciousness could already exist at that root, and it just has got more nuance and these feelings and these.
I would like to add the prefix proto-consciousness. It's nothing that you can the raw matter, the seed, or the structures that would eventually be able to support something like consciousness. Now, I just want to make a point about consciousness and how difficult it is to even begin to think about it, and how probably actually it might be the case that even if we get to the point of having a theory of consciousness, it will still remain subjectively ungraspable and mysterious. It's this problem has a term, has a label. It's like the hard problem of consciousness.
Whether the lights are on or not.
Not quite. The hard problem of consciousness is, let's say, that we manage to understand which. This is going to be an oversimplification. I don't think this is the case. This is not how it functions. But let's say that consciousness is a property of a certain structural system. It's an emergent property, right, of the mind, which is related to having a mind. And in our case, again, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to say that the seat of consciousness is just only the brain. Now, this brain is made out of neurons, and these neurons form from circuits, and they are interconnected with one another. And now, this is a toy model. Again, I just want to keep on emphasizing this. Imagine you have this very complex circuitry of neurons firing together, and as long as these neurons are on and are firing in an orchestrated manner, you are conscious and you're aware and you know your surroundings and you know where you are and you have memories and so on. You know the person you are as long as this group of neurons are firing together. And then you sever one of the connections between two of these neurons, and then these things, all this experience of having a consciousness just dissipates. The lights go off completely. Even if we could map with perfect fidelity the circuitry that gives rise to this conscious state, and even if we could know the exact timings in which these neurons need to fire and how they are connected with one another and their frequency and the voltage and you name it, every single property down to every single atom, you still would not be able to understand at a subjective level why is it the case that when you reconnect this connection that you severed, consciousness goes on. The point is, even if you could describe scientifically, even if you could draw the system that is conscious, a system that is conscious, a group of neurons that is conscious, and locate with infinite level of detail why this system is conscious and why this system is not, which differs from the other in a very minimal way, that would still not guarantee that you have a grasp, a subjective grasp on, yeah, now that I know this, I understand how consciousness arises.
No, it's really tough.
That is usually referred to
This
as
is a subjectivity problem. I mean, as long as you remain subjective to the experience.
It's something that probably you. It's very frustrating, you know. For a person like me, at least.
I have read a lot of people describe this in different words, like the heart problem, but no one has come up with
But then you don't
like how even to go about it. But of course, a lot of neurologists will say that it's just stupid to look at the problem in that manner.
Yeah, no, it's only from the point of view of it leaves me with a profound sense of frustration if that happens to be the case. That even if you get the full theory of consciousness clean, polished, ready to go, packaged nicely and all, but you will still not get it.
Why don't you feel the same way about the electron cloud?
Electron cloud?
Like as in like some natural phenomena.
Yeah, but
you just cannot grasp.
We just. I mean, in this case,
you can like something which is detached from us.
Mm-hmm.
We are more than happy to say, okay, this is what this is how it happens. It's just
we just accept it,
right?
This is just
no, but this is the problem,
it's
right?
Anthropocentric arrogance.
Exactly. No, because people have so much problem with trying to accept the theory of evolution, which is so much more rational than what has happened in the same period of time with physics.
Mm-hmm.
How we have evolved our worldview of the physical realm is so much more.
There's a lot more evidence.
But it's so much less intuitive than something like the theory of evolution. But still, people have a much bigger issue with that than something like quantum mechanics or expansion of the universe. How big is the universe? These kind of notions, like the completely ridiculous ideas we cannot connect with at all. People don't have a problem with that. People have a problem with we have evolved from apes or something that look like apes. So that I'm just trying to point out the
anthropocentric
understanding of
because it involves
because that's why consciousness affects us so much, but not what does it mean that like every atom there is a very strong clasp of matter and then there's this electron cloud around it. We don't have any understanding of that, but we don't sleep or like have sleepless night over that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very anthropological way of thinking that makes us very anxious about understanding consciousness and not some other things.
It's understandable why that's the case, right? Because you all let me just make my point. We all have a first-hand experience on how it is to be human. We all know how complex it is to even understand your own thoughts. How complicated that is. How difficult it is to sort out and put your head in order. And everybody can easily contemplate all the possibilities of decisions that are at your disposal at every given moment, and this notion of free will and so on. And then the theory of evolution, what it's essentially telling you from the human perspective is that, there's a naturalistic way to explain that. That level of incredibly confusing level of complexity that you experience every time you open your eyes and you look at the world, turns out it's the consequence of first and foremost of physics turned into chemistry turned into biology, and there's a whole sequence and a whole hierarchy of natural phenomena occurring that can actually explain that. We don't know exactly the mechanisms yet; it's not all sorted out, but we are pretty confident that is explainable in naturalistic terms, and that's why people have a very hard time to accept that, and a lot of misinterpretations of how evolution. The typical misinterpretation being. How can something so complex as a human mind can come from absolute randomness? The random collision of building blocks turning somehow through the eons into a substrate, an organism that is able to realize about its own existence and all the plethora of possibilities that lay in front of it. So yeah, I think it's understandable at a subjective level why a lot of people have a bigger problem grasping that, accepting that as a theory rather than, for instance, theories of quantum mechanics, even though they are deeply mysterious. Yeah.
No, but that's the whole point. Like some things, it's just within our perceptive bounds. At the moment, we just don't understand. So now I'm making the argument that we don't need to go to like ludicrous explanation. So we don't understand the mind, so it must be some spiritual context to it.
Yeah. Naturalistic explanations, I think, are going to be.
There is most likely a naturalistic explanation to it. It's just that we just don't. That it's too cloudy for us at the moment.
Yeah, we don't have to look so far away. All the explanations come from the world if we observe it, right? So,
do you think that there's some non-naturalistic element that might?
I don't think so. Actually, I really think that all explanations lie within what we can observe and we can see, what we can experience, what we can.
But we'll probably never be able to explain it.
We probably might be able to explain it, but even if the explanation comes along, we will not be able to grasp it. That's
it's like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? What is the
answer?
Yeah, what is the answer? There was such a disappointing answer, right?
43, what was it?
42.
42.
Come on.
Oh boy, I missed it. The final. Oh boy. Okay,
Actually, I'm reading it right now, so I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah.
The restaurant at the end of the
not
universe.
Yet there. I'm just reading the Hitchhiker's Guide still.
So I think overall we agree on this issue more or less.
Yeah.
No? As far as
but I think we kind of gave a nice perspective on
at least on where we stand and where we think possibilities lie.
This is an ending debate, right?
Sure, we can talk on and on about it.
We have to unfortunately cut it at some point, but
maybe at some point we'll have somebody here that doesn't accept this naturalistic explanation.
I do believe 50 years from now, someone gives me the answer and I'll be like, okay, it would satisfy me. But that's not the point to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
The point. You can claim many things, but still you have to back up your claims, right?
Yeah.
And I think the way to back up your claims is also to experiment within the world. I mean, you can make lots of claims, but still, from a very pragmatical point of view, what matters is what you can prove, right? What you can really show.
And what you can't prove, you don't need to find reasons for why they are what they are. Sometimes it can just be a skeptic with respect to that.
You can simply say, we don't know yet, right? We're not there yet.
Yeah.
It's much better than saying, this might happen because of this or that or that.
No, but speculation, speculation is
rooted in some rationality can be.
Speculation is a
rational speculation.
Yeah, but it's the fertile ground for hypothesis, and a hypothesis eventually is the stuff that can be subject to experiment, and afterwards it might become part of the canon of science if these experiments turn out, whichever way they turn out. All right.
Yeah.
I think
we
pretty much covered this.
Heady discussion.
Yeah. Good. So I think this is time to conclude this episode. Thank you very much for being here, and I think
we should apologize for not letting him talk so much.
Oh, no, please.
We just went on ranting.
I'm really, humbled for the opportunity to
Oh, come
share this space with you guys. I mean,
Oh
I
boy,
really.
if I were whiter, I would blush.
If I were white,
I should do this more often, because when you share ideas, you learn much more. You listen to different points of view, and this is really like enriching. It's really. I really like it. It's a very nice.
Good. So I hope you are open for an eventual second. Well, it would be actually third invitation to be here with us.
Sure, definitely.
If that turns out to be the case.
Yeah.
Good. So that's it for this episode, and we're coming back.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Cheers.
If you like what we do, please help us continue doing it simply by subscribing to our YouTube channel, following us on Twitter, liking us on Facebook, visiting our website tillthebottom.com, or spreading the voice. All the links are provided in the description. Thank you for listening, and until the next time.